Ayub, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited that you're here. Thank you.
But thank you. So it's been really, normally, if in normal times, I'd have been in Birmingham in rehearsals and seeing the show from beginning to end, but it's just impossible. I mean, I live in Spain, so it's just a nightmare kind of getting COVID jabs and permissions and tests and God knows what. It's a nightmare.
It's all about a connection. It's all about a connection, isn't it? Connection with the internet, connection with COVID, which is the injection. So come on, look, I know who you are. Yeah, I know who you are. There's many people who may not be aware of who you are and what you do. So I'm going to do it. This is going to be terrible. I'm going to do it in the style of Cilla Black. I'm going to ask you, what's your name? Where are you from? And what do you do?
Right. My name's Ayub Khan Din. I'm from Salford, which is the northwest of England, about 5 minutes away from Manchester. Primarily I was an actor from the age of 19 till 40 something. And in that time, when I wasn't working as an actor, I used to write as a hobby, plays. When we're actors, is what we do. We've got nothing else to do. So when I was at drama school in '82, that's when the writing started, and that's when I first wrote the first draft of East is East, which is a play that became my kind of calling card and a new career as a writer.
How does it feel? I mean, you've mentioned East is East, hence the reason it's part of the conversation as well, because it's going to be at Birmingham Rep. I think, is it starting this Friday? From what I gather, this Friday. This is 25 years on when you first did it. How does it feel for you that, the longevity of this particular play itself?
I think the thing is, it's never gone away, because even though the original production of the play finished, the following year, the film came out, and the film has had an equally long afterlife. And I mean, most people think when you say East is East, most people do think of the film. But the play has never actually not stopped being performed. Every other year, there's been a production of it, either in the UK or around the world. It's been translated into various different languages. And so for me, it's never really gone away. What is poignant for me is that it's been recognised now as a classic British play. And we're also celebrating that fact by having a 25th anniversary production in its birthplace, which was Birmingham Rep in the studio, and kind of the candles on top of the cake, if you like, is then we go to the National Theatre. And in a way, not that we need to be legitimised by the National Theatre, but it is a place everybody wants their work shown. Once it's kind of shown at the National, then it becomes part of our cultural history. So in that sense, it makes me really excited that it really has come home and fully, if you like.
Do you pinch yourself? Do you pinch yourself where you kind of go, I mean, did you ever imagine this, like 25 years from the time that you wrote it, that it's still going strong? Or did you always have that inkling where you kind of...
No, I mean, I wrote the first draft in 1982 at drama school. And then it was performed 25 years ago for the first time professionally. And, when you're writing, you don't think of a play's longevity. You're thinking of the immediate context of the play, which is I'm thinking about my family. I'm thinking about the experiences that we went through. And I'm telling a story. You've got no idea that it's going to kind of appeal across cultures. So it's been an incredible journey with it, and continues to be so. And as particularly as so many people find what happened in my life relevant to their lives as well. And it's still as relevant today as it was 25 years ago, if not more so. I mean, 5 years ago, I actually played the father in the West End production. And people who'd seen the original show came up to me and said, "Oh, you've rewritten it, haven't you?" I was like, "No, political now. It feels much more political." I said, "Well, no, it's like the world has caught up with the problems that we were facing as kids in East is East." which is a sense of identity, a sense of belonging. We are now, we're not just questioning this in our homes now, in our communities, but it's actually on a bigger stage, it's on television, it's in the papers, it's just there now. And especially since the whole kind of Black Lives Matter, everyone is now questioning who we are and where we are in this country. At what point have we come to in the UK?
Do you think to a certain degree, I mean, we haven't talked about what the story is, and I will ask you that for those, because obviously there's new audiences now, because generations have moved on and there's different audiences who are listening to you. For you, is that a bit of a shame in the sense that we haven't really moved on, that we are still, to this day, I'm of Asian background, of an Indian background. I think yourself, you're of Pakistani background. Forgive me if I'm wrong and let us know which background yourself is. So, and we still are having to, I was going to say the word justify who we are and what our place in society is. And we have to talk about the cultural issues continually, whereby maybe sometimes, I don't know, maybe because I've done some theatre in that as well, whereby we're kind of going, really, should we be talking about other stories as well, where they're kind of going?
I think what's happening now is, for a long time, we were talking about identity from a position of, we were talking about our sense of identity and of belonging from a position of that we knew our history, we knew our connection to the UK, and it's the rest of the UK who didn't know what the context was of our being here. For years, I was taught nothing in school about empire or the Commonwealth. I had to find all this out myself. And I think the majority of white kids today in school have no idea what the relationship between the United Kingdom and the subcontinent is. We've got an over nearly 200-year history. The English language is scattered with Hindi Urdu words. We are part of the very fabric of the United Kingdom. We are what made the United Kingdom rich. And I think what is happening now is, I think our maturity as a British Asian community, we're at the very pinnacle of our maturity now. And we're not asking for people to accept who we are. We're demanding that we're accepted. We're also demanding that they accept what their history was. We don't want to hear about those kind of colonial cliches of empire building. We want people to know what the nitty gritty of empire building was, the abuse of power, the rape of countries. That's what we want to hear now. I think as an immigrant community, we are at that point where we are demanding it rather than asking for it.
No, thank you.
We're not having to. We don't need to justify why we're here anymore. We're here because we're part of the fabric of this country. We're part of the historical makeup of this country.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. Just going back slightly to East is East. Tell us a little bit about the story itself for those who aren't aware of the story.
The play is autobiographical. It's taken in Salford in 1971. It's about my family. My father was an immigrant who came to the UK in 1927, 28, from India, from Kashmir. And he was in the Indian Merchant Navy. And in 1927, he jumped ship in London and lived around the East End, around the dock area. And then eventually, during the war, he was in the munitions factory in Birmingham. And then after the war, in about 47, he moved to Manchester, Salford, met my mum. They got married. She was English of Irish heritage. They proceeded to they bought a fish and chip shop in Salford by the docks. 10 kids, 8 boys and 2 girls. And everything is fine, except he insisted that all my older brothers had to marry Pakistani girls. And it just became this clash of cultures in the household. So every time each son decided that he wanted to move out of the house or he wanted to have an English girlfriend, he was kicked out. And all the way down the line for 5 boys, that's what happened. Until eventually the crunch came when it was my eldest sister, and he was insisting that she marry a Pakistani guy, and my mum said, no, that's it, no more. And that's when the big kind of blow up was, and that was around 1971. So what we also have is, while the family dynamics and the arguments and the stories going on of George, the character in the play, who's based on my father, is trying to set up an arranged marriage for his sons. At the same time, it's the Bangladeshi War of Independence. So in many ways, his culture, his country is breaking up, and his family is breaking up. And it's a man who needs to come to terms with the realities of his life, of the decisions he made. Because even though he married an English woman, he wanted his boys to marry Pakistani girls, but none of us had none of my older brothers were also scared of him because he was a real kind of patriarchal figure. No one turned around and said, well, Pakistani women are so great. How come you married my mum? Mm-hmm. The hypocrisy of his argument never hit home to him. It was always do as I say, not as I do.
Which I think you've kind of hit on. It's still kind of very relevant today, where that still happens in various pockets of various communities. Come on, which character were you? You've got to be Sajid.
Yeah, I was. That was me.
Have you got that jacket? Have you got that parka?
No, it got thrown out actually. When I was at it for a long time as a keepsake, but it was thrown out when I was at drama school and parents moved house. But no, that was based on me.
Wow.
As a kid growing up.
With the story, obviously, is it still set? I mean, do you keep tweaking it, or is it kind of no? That's what I did then. It stays there as it is.
1971.
Okay.
It's set in 1971, but all the arguments are as relevant today as they were then. That whole kind of as we were just talking about, our sense of identity, our place in society today, and all the kind of problems that my father faced, that his relatives who had started to settle in the UK in the early 60s, kind of saying, see what happens when you marry outside of our community. Your kids grow up with no culture, they have no religion, they don't understand any, they don't understand their own language. I was like, well, English is our language. And as for culture, it's about, you are where you're from. But all these guys, all these relatives who used to point the finger at my dad and say, this is what happens. They've all gone through exactly the same problems as my dad, as their children have grown up and face exactly the same problems with both parents being Pakistani that we faced as a mixed race family. And it continues. I know some people do assimilate and find the perfect balance and living there, having a sense of their cultural history as well as who they are and where they are now. But there are massive elements right across the communities, both in the Indian, the Sikh, you name it, across the British Asian community. There are elements who are still stuck in the past.
Do you think that part of that is in the sense of there is still this question: who are we? As individuals, we've got, on the one side, we have society that pigeonholes us in a certain way. And at the same time, if you look at whether you talk about, in terms of me, I'm of Indian background, but that doesn't mean I'm Indian. I always say to people, I'm British Indian, which is totally different to being Indian, because their identity is totally different to me. And then obviously I'm Punjabi as well, which gives it a different element. Do you think that's where there is a lot of confusion at the same time?
I don't think it held much by the men and women of my dad's generation, who always harked back to these kind of through rose-tinted glasses to this perfect life in India and Pakistan, and then eventually we were all going to, my dad was going to pack up, sell up, and move everyone back to Pakistan, but it never happened. And the people who did go back realised how English they'd become. But they'd sold this myth on their children. So it was a myth that we used to fight against, but also within the Pakistani community, that kind of sense of identity has changed again since the onset of radical Islam. There's with being, rather than being called like Pakistani Muslims back in Bangladeshi Muslims, it's like you're lumped into one group now as Muslims, but we all have separate identities. So there's that being thrown in the works, which is also confusing to that generation. So again, they're still searching for that sense of identity. What is that sense of identity? Is it now an Islamic identity? Because that's how where everyone's being pushed to, or is it still we're British and we're Muslim, or we're British and we're Hindu or Sikh or whatever?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I wasn't aware, and this is Wikipedia for you. I didn't realise that you're one of the creators of Ackley Bridge. Am I right, or have I got that wrong?
No. I was the creator.
Wow, the creator! Oh my gosh, that's one of my wife's favourite programs. They love it. And so what I was going to ask you was, again, it's that thing of, with the stories that are within there, is it almost a case of what comes first, the chicken or the egg? And what I mean by that is in the sense that, are you planting a seed of thought in terms of creating possibilities where you're kind of going, look, this is what could happen. Don't be afraid to try it, because there's nothing wrong with it. There might be people looking on the outskirts who are saying that is wrong, but it's okay to do it. Whilst at the same time, you might be mirroring stories that you may have heard or you may have come across.
No, I think with Ackley, the premise of the show is that these are two communities. There was two schools. One was predominantly brown, one was predominantly white, which have been amalgamated. And it's what happens in Ackley shows that it doesn't matter what colour or nationality you are, we all go through the same emotions. All the kids are basically going through exactly the same emotions as young teenagers do. Obviously, there are slight cultural differences, but on the whole, what Ackley Bridge shows is that there's much more that unites us than separates us. That, my name might be Ayub or your name might be Peter, but as teenagers, we're going through exactly the same problems. And I think that's what's fantastic about Ackley Bridge, is that it allowed us to tell those stories of our communities and how those communities affect each other. I think that's one of the best things about Ackley Bridge, is that it does allow you to explore, for the first time, explore those kind of stories that affect our communities. Like with the Pakistani family, her daughter becomes a lesbian. Now, homosexuality, LGBTQ issues within the Asian community are still a no-no. It's still not accepted. There are so many people, gay people, who are still living in the shadows because how they think their sexuality is going to affect their relationship with their family or with their religion. So we had a massive response because we carried that storyline over 3 series about a boy and a girl, both gay, who met because they thought if they got married, they could pretend to be married, but still leave their gay lifestyles. So, I mean, the response we got from young gay Asians right across the board was incredible, because that was the first time that, one, I could find out information about my gay community, but also that my parents were sat down watching this family go through these experiences. Now, some believe that it was never going to change their families, but others thought it was a really great kind of stepping stone for their families to meet across this massive divide, which is this sexuality.
Did you get many complaints from people from various communities?
No, I don't think we did. I certainly never heard any. I mean, you heard people grumbling. I think there was one. No, there was one. I read, and it was like, I love this program. It's really great. I love the fact that you're showing Asians in real Asians, not kind of made up ones like you see in soap operas and things, but Asian characters with real problems, having real storylines. But all the business about homosexuality is completely wrong. You shouldn't write about that. That's what they said. But it's, you know, that hypocrisy is there. You're really entertaining me, but I don't really want to know about that bit. Well, that's the whole point of the show, is that those bits are brought into the mainstream, not hitting the people over the head with it, but showing the effects that the difficulties that these young people have, you know, choosing their sexuality within their cultures.
And I assume a lot of it is that whole thing of it's having those conversations, creating those conversations through television, where people find them difficult conversations, you know, whether it's to do with sexuality, whether it's to do with dementia, whether it's that whole thing of having a responsibility. And I'm talking about issues in the Asian community. And maybe, you know, in terms of in my background, talking about things like that, if people want to talk about things like that, which is very, very difficult. But as soon as you've got something like that on TV, what it does is it opens it up, where it's like, oh yeah, it's okay. It's okay to talk about. What do you mean you think there's something wrong about this?
It normalizes the conversation.
Yeah.
It normalizes it. And that's what I mean about Ackley. You know, white kids are going through having exactly the same problem.
Totally.
So how,
go on.
I'm just saying we did, so that they're working on the 5th series now of Ackley, but I've left it. I've done.
Oh, okay. So what can I ask what you're moving on to?
I'm waiting on, I just written a pilot for a 3-part drama about the Grunwick strike, which was led by Jayabin Patel. Desai. And she was an East African Asian woman working this factory in 1976, 77 in London. The bad working conditions, and they wanted to form a union, and she led this incredible strike, which was one of the biggest strikes, one of the biggest, most important industrial actions in the country ever in the history, which was led by a group of Asian women.
Yeah, I think that if you Google it, I think there's an image of her where she's holding a board. Is there? From what I remember, and you're kind of like, wow. Again, these are stories which you kind of go, we need to hear these stories, because you never hear these particular stories itself. Yeah. Come on, look, I've got the big question for you now. This is a massive question. Yeah, I hear that you used to be a hairdresser. What I want to know is, do you still cut hair?
No, I was really bad. What happened, it was like, when I'm in school now, I was 76, and I had 2 brothers and a sister who were working in a very kind of Vidal Sassoon type salon in Manchester. And I was leaving school, and my mum and dad said, well, you're not being on the dole, you're not signing on. My brothers went, well, you have to come and work with us. So I ended up doing it for 2 years, and I was awful. It was the work, I hated every single second of it. So I did that for 2 years, and then one day one of the other juniors was reading a book, and I picked it up at the break time. It was David Niven's The Moon's a Balloon, and it was open on a bit where he was in the army and thought, oh, I think I'm going to be an actor. I thought, that's going from one extreme to the other. I thought, I'll try that. So I literally rang up Salford Tech, a local college, and said, do you do a drama course? And they said, yeah. And I got on it, did 2 years there, 3 years at drama school, and became an actor.
Wow, brilliant. Any plans to come back into acting, or you still do it?
Well, I did East is East in the West End 5 years ago. 2 years before that, I wrote a musical that was on off Broadway, and the leading actor fell down some stairs. So I took over. So I started my own musical off Broadway.
Brilliant.
I don't think, but I wanted to do George, because initially at drama school, when I was like 21, 22, I thought I'm going to be playing Tariq.
Yeah.
And the time in between, like age and everything, I ended up playing George. So those are the things I wanted to do.
Yeah, Ornbury just really brought that character to life, didn't he? Do you think there's always that expectation where people almost base it on his performance, because it was just so powerful? Everything that he did about it, funny, true, that whole element of when you're getting into the character.
People do go people who only know the play go in with certain expectations, but they're won over instantly by the George in the play, because it's a different beast from the film. The film is much more comedic led, but it has, has its very dark moments. But the politics aren't really there in the film. Whereas in the play, the politics are there at the forefront. Each of those kids in the play all have an argument. They all have a viewpoint of how their lives should be. And so it's a much more political piece. It's equally as funny, if not more funny, I think, the play. Because I think the humour is much more subtle at times. But George and Ella are still, they're all standout parts. But depending on who's playing George and Ella, it depends, because sometimes you think Ella's the lead and sometimes you think George is the lead. It's great when you can get two actors on the same level, which apparently in the Birmingham production, we've got two fantastic actors giving amazing performances as George and Ella. So fingers crossed everyone kind of enjoys it.
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing it. I know it's due out this Friday, 10th of September, I think that is where it starts and the run. And as you say, then it just goes on further places itself. I'm sure if they type it onto the internet, they can do that. I'm just coming towards the end of it, so the interview. So I just want to say thank you to you before I stop recording, unless you want to quickly throw anything else in there.
No, that's it. I think I've said enough.
That's great. Look, I'm going to just stop recording. Thank you.